Chapter 13. For the past 2 hours, the room had become a sanctuary. The suite was like something out of a luxury hotel. Polished wood floors, smooth white walls trimmed in gold, and soft ambient lighting that glowed like candlelight. The two connected rooms held a small living space with plush furniture and a second room with 2 beds that no one had touched. The blankets remained crisp, the sheets undisturbed. No one had slept. George Freeman knelt near the coffee table, hands clasped in a silent prayer. He was dressed neat, clean black jeans, a crisp flannel shirt, and a lightweight utility vest. It wasn't fancy, but it was intentional, a quiet kind of armor. Beside him, Evelyn sat on the couch with her hands folded in her lap. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, her eyes closed. She'd prayed through nearly every psalm she could remember, whispering them under her breath like anchors. A holstered sidearm rested beside her on the couch, ready to be clipped back on. In the corner, Rose, wise, grandmotherly, sharp-eyed, read aloud from her small leather Bible in a calm, steady voice. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. Young Madeline sat cross-legged on the floor, fidgeting with the zipper of her jacket. She wore black jeans and a brown fleece pullover that made her look like she was headed to a winter camping trip, not a place of myth and danger. Her wide, uncertain eyes scanned the room, then fixed on George. "Will there be, monsters in there?" she asked softly. "Real ones?" George looked over, his face calm but serious.
"Might be, but that doesn't matter. God already knows the way through."
"But what if I mess up?" she said. "What if I freeze? What if I can't—" "You're not alone, Maddie," Evelyn said gently. "You never have to fight alone. We've got each other, and we've got the Lord." Madeline didn't speak again, but she nodded and scooted a little closer to Rose, who gave her a light pat on the knee. Then came the knock. 3 steady raps at the door. The room fell into immediate silence. Sergeant McKinney stepped inside, a helmet under his arm. His dark combat armor polished like ceremonial plate. A silver cross gleamed on his chest, and behind him stood 3 silent soldiers in matching gear, expressions solemn, postures rigid.
"It's time," McKinney said. "Armory first, then the gate."
George stood close and helped Evelyn to her feet. Rose closed her Bible. Madeline slung her small backpack over her shoulder.
"Stay close," George told them all. "We move together."
The soft click of the guest room doors behind them echoed louder than it should have, like a seal closing. Leaving the illusion of safety from the civilized world behind them, the mystery of the labyrinth lay ahead. George didn't look back. They had prayed for 2 hours, quiet, focused, not dramatic, like deep prayer. Hands held, hearts poured out. Now that warmth was behind them. Before them was something ancient, something unknown.
"Stay close," George said softly.
Evelyn fell into step beside him, adjusting the strap of her sidearm. Rose and Madeline followed. The girls stepped lighter, but uncertain. Behind them, others emerged, townspeople, couples, strangers, now walking in the same direction. Sergeant McKinney led the way, his boots striking rhythmically against polished stone. The corridor curved gently ahead, lined with carved scripture in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. The light here was gold-toned and steady, glowing from recessed sconces shaped like candle flames. McKinney didn't look back.
"The stairwell begins under the sanctuary tree. Keep pace."
As they turned a final bend, the corridor opened into the heart of the underground base, the sanctuary main hall. The space was enormous, circular. The domed ceiling above shimmered like a cloudy sky, though no sun shone. Yet the base had advanced lighting, and in the center of it all stood the giant tree, the core of the compound. It looked alive, but more than that, conscious. The trunk was thick and pale, its surface veined with soft light. Copper vines wove through its roots and branches, humming faintly. The air around it had a stillness, as if the tree was the source of the breath in the room. Then they saw the creatures. Small, strange beings nestled in the branches, not hostile, but feral, just wrong. A fox-like animal with feathered haunches twitched its ears and watched them pass. Something with translucent wings and glossy fur hung upside down like a bat, blinking lazily. A long-tailed creature with owl eyes slinked between the roots, following a Catholic priest dressed in white. Madeline tugged lightly at Rose's sleeve. "Grandma, what are those?" Rose stared up, squinting. "I couldn't tell you." "They're not afraid of us," Evelyn murmured, scanning the branches. "That's the strange part." George slowed his pace for just a second, watching a blue-scaled cat curl around the neck of a passing soldier like a scarf. The soldier scratched behind its ears without looking up.
"They live here," he said. "They belong to them."
"Pets?" Madeline whispered. Evelyn hesitated. "Something like that." "They're beautiful," the girl added.
Rose said quietly. "Let's not make assumptions. They could be dangerous."
They didn't stop. The group kept moving past the towering roots, each one thicker than a tree trunk, winding out across the marble floor like the veins of the mountain itself. Beneath one gigantic root was an open stairwell, lit by torches flickering against stone. 2 guards stood at attention on either side. Halberds crossed in front of the entryway. They stepped aside silently. One spoke only as they passed.
"The armory is below. Then the threshold. May God walk with you."
The stairwell descended in a spiral, smooth obsidian walls glistening in the firelight. The air grew colder, heavier. The silence among the group wasn't out of fear, not yet, but reverence. Their footfalls echoed like a slow heartbeat.
"This place is older than it looks," George said, more to himself than anyone.
"Feels like we're walking into a cathedral," Evelyn replied. The chamber opened suddenly, wide and circular. The ceilings arched high above, ringed with hanging lamps and polished sconces. The stone underfoot was etched with faint geometric designs, and the walls were covered with weapons. Not piled, not cluttered, arranged, preserved, hung on the walls. There were rows of antique swords, medieval, Roman, Eastern. Modern rifles and pistols sat beside handcrafted bows and ceremonial blades. Destructive tools rested beside ancient war axes. Nothing here was ornamental. All tools for doing damage, weapons of war. No one rushed to grab anything. They just looked, then slowly walked in as a group. George moved toward the far wall and stopped in front of a long black compound bow, simple and well-maintained. He lifted it, tested the tension of the string, then slipped the quiver strap over his shoulder without a word. The arrows had razor tips. Evelyn browsed slowly. She tried the weight of a few rifles before settling on an M1 Garand. Older, solid. She slung a bandolier over her chest and gave George a faint nod, like, "This'll do." She looked to make sure it was loaded. The gleam of brass glowed from the cartridge. Then she reinserted it. Madeline lingered over the rack of small arms. Her hand hovered over a few options before settling on a .410 shotgun with a smooth wooden grip and a short barrel. She didn't say anything, she just looked at it, then looked at Rose.
"You trained with that one, remember?"
Rose said. Her voice was calm, encouraging.
"It's perfect for you. Remember the safety rules of a gun. Only point it at something you want to shoot. Keep the barrel down, and always stay away from us."
Madeline gave a small nod and slung it over her shoulder. It had a bandolier of shells on the strap. Rose chose a small revolver with a short barrel and an old leather holster. She gave it a spin, not flashy, just muscle memory, then checked the cylinder and clipped it to her belt. Nearby, the townspeople began their selections. Some moved with practiced hands, ranchers, veterans, hunters. Others looked overwhelmed, choosing the simplest blades or tools they could manage. "Rose, Knowing many of the townspeople from her years in Oregon, glanced over and saw Miguel, the town mechanic, sheathing a gladius into his leather scabbard. He was puffing out his chest and pacing back and forth, wearing a gladiator helmet. A few feet away, Abigail, the widow who ran the bakery, was helping her teenage son Luke fasten a chest plate over his hoodie. Luke gripped a long spear awkwardly, unsure how to stand. "You don't have to use it perfectly," she said, adjusting the strap. "You just have to keep hold of it. Be brave, son. I'm here with you. I love you." An older man, white beard, denim vest, big hands, picked up a heavy fireman's axe and ran his thumb along the edge. "Name's Jack," he said as George passed him. "Retired, mostly. Didn't expect to spend my twilight years like this." George gave him a nod. "No one did." "Still," Jack said, lifting the axe, "feels better than going out in a hospital bed." Sergeant McKinney stepped into the center of the armory. His voice was calm, firm, almost pastoral. "You need to hear this." Everyone turned towards him. "You've seen parts of this place. You've felt it. The next step is different. Once we pass through the threshold, the rules change. The labyrinth doesn't respond to strategy. It responds to the condition of your soul." He paused, letting that land. "Some of you may be tempted. The labyrinth will try to make you leave the narrow path. Some will be tested. Some will face the thing they've never truly dealt with. Whatever happens, stay on the path." He let the silence linger before continuing. "Repent, if you haven't already. You'll need to be clean. Not perfect, but clean." He gestured toward the door at the far end, closed yet humming faintly. Glowing blue letters were carved into it. It was a 50-foot-tall double door, a megalithic entrance. "This place often kills, or it reveals. And if there's anything inside you that's not rooted in truth, it will find it, and exploit it. It may drive you mad. It contains horrors beyond your worst nightmares." Nobody moved, nobody joked, some openly cried. George looked over the group. Some stood with closed eyes, others gripped their weapons tighter. Evelyn stepped closer to Madeline and laid a hand on her back. "Keep your ears open, but your heart guarded." "I will," the girl said. Her voice wasn't strong, but it was steady. Rose clasped her hands together in front of her chest, then closed her eyes, a prayer without words. George turned back to the sergeant. "We're ready." McKinney nodded once, and then they moved to the labyrinth doors. The sergeant stood beholding the largest doors George had ever seen. Black, monolithic stone glowing in blue sigils from top to bottom. He stepped forward, placing his hand to the larger round one. The sigil under Sergeant McKinney's hand flared from blue to molten orange. The doors shuddered and groaned, stone upon stone, as if the earth itself resisted letting them pass. Then the seam yawned wide, and a torrent of jungle air poured through, wet, hot, alive. It smelled of rain-soaked soil and overripe fruit, thick with the musk of living things. Somewhere within, exotic birds shrieked. Beneath them, a deeper sound rose, a roar that didn't belong to any world men had mapped. The crowd hesitated. "Forward," McKinney commanded, his voice sharp as steel on stone. The soldiers pressed in, shepherding townsfolk through the threshold. "March, march, march!" They stepped into a living forest cathedral. Trees with luminous veins arched like pillars, their canopies lost in cavern-dark heights. Tall, growing carnivorous flowers blossomed, hissed and snapped at insects, glowing faintly in hues of green and violet. To the right, a mountain loomed, black, jagged, immovable, its crowned by a waterfall of molten light. The river at its base moved like liquid fire, running alongside a narrow stone path cut into the forest's heart. George's eyes swept the terrain, hard but wary. He tightened his grip on Evelyn's hand, not as a gesture of comfort, but as a pact. Whatever waits, we face it together. Evelyn bent low to Madeline, her voice calm though her heartbeat betrayed her. "Stay with me, darling. No matter what you hear, don't let it go. Hold on to my backpack strap so I know you're here. Madeline clutched her arm, trembling but unable to stop staring at the glowing plants that bent as though they breathed. Her voice cracked, a whisper meant only for Evelyn. It's beautiful, and I hate it. It's so scary. I see things moving in the forest. Rose, standing just behind, didn't correct her. She lifted her chin, her eyes steady beneath the glow. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The words did not tremble. They were a nail driven into wood. McKinney lifted a hand, halting the group. This is the narrow road, he said, voice low and firm. You'll see paths breaking off. Don't trust them. Wide is the gate and broad the way that leads to destruction. Narrow is the way to life. That's not poetry here. It's survival. As he spoke, the arch in the background ahead darkened. The air folded inward, and a shape emerged from the ruin, wings unfurling first, vast as storm fronts. A towering figure stepped into the light, black-scaled skin devouring every glow that touched it. Its goat-like legs dug into the stones, its eyes wells of fathomless night. The sword across its back was not carried. It seemed a piece of its spine, as natural as bone. Huge ram horns on its head. The crowd froze. Welcome to the Labyrinth, the being said, its voice rolling through air, water, and marrow alike. I am of the Nephilim, cursed to watch what men choose, sentenced for thousands of years to tend this labyrinth for my sins. The day come I may soon leave. No one breathed. Evelyn clutched Madeline close. George instinctively shifted, a wall between them and the creature. Rose's lips moved in silent prayer. The Nephilim's gaze fell on McKinney. He looked like a dark angel from a fictional movie, impossible to behold. Then the lighting. Its hand closed around the sergeant's throat. Like lightning, its hand closed around the sergeant's throat, lifting him high. His boots dangled above the stone. Cries burst from the people, weapons half raised, then frozen by McKinney's hand, signaling a restraint even as he choked for breath. Are you the leader of this company? The being growled. The words weren't asked, they were carved into the air, with his voice so deep, thunderous, powerful. McKinney was hurled to the stones, gasping. He rose, stumbling, holding his neck, then finally straightened, and met the angel's gaze. I am Sergeant Nathan McKinney, he said, his voice rough but clear. These people are under my charge. I will lead them through. The angel's eyes narrowed as though weighing him on scales unseen, and then it spoke. You are measured, found worthy enough to be tested. Know this, the path ahead leads to a lake. Its waters often strength at the cost of your soul. Many drink, many return, not as men. Few endure, fewer reach the lift that carries them back to the sky. It spread its wings and flapped ferociously. The cavern wind roared, tearing leaves from branches and scattering petals like sparks. Walk the narrow way or fall. That choice is yours alone. With a thunderclap of air, the angel launched upward, its form swallowed by darkness above. For a long moment, only the waterfall's hiss remained. Then voices broke, fragile and human, from the group. Lord, keep us. We must stay together. I want to get out of here. But before McKinney could regroup them, a handful of young men surged forward. Torchlight flared in their fists, their faces hard with reckless fire. We're not crawling like sheep, one shouted. We'll find the way ourselves. Without waiting, they charged down the narrow stones, their figures swallowed by the glowing dark. George exhaled through his nose, jaw set. They could be running to their death, he muttered. Their path ahead is dangerous. Let's take it slow. I have supplies in my pack. Evelyn pressed Madeline closer, eyes tracking the fading torches. The forest will swallow them. I'm seeing all kinds of ways ahead to choose from. Was that thing an angel? Rose's voice was firm, iron in her old bones. I read about them in the book of Enoch. We walk with God. That thing is serving something like a prison sentence here. He didn't seem to want to hurt us, just warn us." Finally, McKinney's shoulders squared. He steadied his breath, his voice controlled. "The rest of you, columns of 2. We move slow, steady, together. Eyes on the stones, hearts on the Lord." And so they did, into a forest where bioluminescent light flickered like untrustworthy stars, and shadows shifted as though alive, where every breath carried the taste of temptation, where the path itself felt like it was waiting to test them. The doors megalithic sealed behind them, with a groan that reverberated through the stone. The sound lingered like a shutting of a tomb. They were all in here for good now. What lay ahead was no ordinary forest. The air was damp, thick with moss and iron, heavy enough to taste. The trees rose like pillars into a ceilingless dark, their trunks striated with veins of faint blue light. Giant blossoms opened and closed with a slow, deliberate rhythm, exhaling mist that smelled both sweet and rotten. When they snapped shut on some drifting moth, the echo cracked like bone. The path was waiting for them, a line of pale stone, unnaturally straight, unnaturally clean. It gleamed faintly underfoot as though it carried its own secret fire. For a long while no one spoke. George walked in silence, his broad shoulders squared. His hand rested on Evelyn's back, not as comfort, but as covenant. "Whatever this place demands, we face it together." His eyes scanning around them relentlessly, everyone marched ahead. Evelyn leaned to Madeline. Her voice was steady, deliberate. "Hold my strap, darling. Don't look left or right. Just keep with me." She could see strange figures way back in the forest, thick vegetation, an uncountable number of huge trees. Madeline tried to obey, fingers tight. Her eyes, too young for this, darted to every flicker in the undergrowth. "It feels like the trees are alive," she whispered, "like they're waiting." Rose walked close behind, lifting her gaze, and answered not only to the girl but the forest itself. "The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, and even for evermore." The words sounded like iron driven into wood. "Keep praying," Sergeant McKinney said. His voice was soldier firm but softer than usual, the kind of softness that comes only when a man knows steel won't be enough. "It's the only weapon they can't take." So they walked. Their footfalls seemed too loud. The river to their right hissed and whispered as if carrying secrets downstream. Far above, unseen birds shrieked. Farther still, something larger answered with a rumble that shook bark from the trees. Then the sound came. Ding! A single bell, small, clear, terrible. The company halted. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Ding! Closer now. The glowing plants dimmed with each strike, as though bowing to the sound. The whispers followed, at first like wind through branches, but wind does not speak in tongues. They came low and curling, words too twisted to understand, yet heavy with intent. Some rasped like dying throats, others purred like a lover, and together they coiled around the company like smoke. Evelyn's breath hitched. "They're talking." Evelyn bent, pressing her cheek to her hair. "Don't listen. Their words are not for you." George tightened his jaw. "Keep your eyes forward." Rose's voice rose, clear and defiant. "I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." The whispers faltered just for a heartbeat. Then the bell rang again. Shapes stirred at the edge of sight. Black-robed figures stood among the trees, tall, faceless, their garments darker than shadow, absorbing the forest's glow. They only watched. They were terrifying. No one could get a good look at them, which made it worse. Evelyn's heart thundered in her chest. A man near the rear of the group broke. His nerves snapped like brittle glass. "You don't scare me," he cried, flinging down his pack. Torch in hand, he leapt from the path. "I see you!" His voice ended abruptly. "Hold the line, don't go," McKinney roared. But the man was already gone, swallowed by the undergrowth. For a moment his voice carried back. "This can't be real!" Then a scream. Not the cry of a man wounded, but something deeper. The sound of a soul being unmade. It rose, twisted, and then cut off. Silence. The bell tolled again, this time not one, but many, ringing from all sides, a chorus of mockery. The forest seemed to laugh. Goosebumps rose on Madeline's flesh. "Grandma, we need to get away." McKinney's face hardened. His words came like iron drawn thin. He made his choice. "Stay on the stones. We're not safe here. We move on now. Quickly. I don't know what the hell these things are." So they did. One step, then another. Each shadow seemed alive, each whisper pulled at the mind. Yet the path still glowed, narrow and unbending, carrying them forward into the dark. The labyrinth had begun to feed. The air in the trees tasted like metal and old prayers. The bell rang again. Ding! Thin as a razor, as if a child's toy were chiming inside the tomb. It threaded through the trunks and left a chill, cold in their bone marrow. No wind answered it, no life stirred. Everything seemed to pause. Then a sound so small it should have been swallowed by the dark. A baby's cry. It cut across the night like a single perfect note. Evelyn's head turned so fast her hair whipped across her face. The cry was a thing that did not belong in here. Raw, immediate, urgent. "That's a baby," she said, the words small and brittle. George reached out without thinking, palm on her wrist, steadying her like an anchor. "Hold on," he said. His voice was flat. His eyes had already gone forward into the black where the sound came from. Old Man Jack's beard caught in torchlight and looked like winter on a mountain. He put one hand on the haft of his axe and squared toward Sergeant McKinney. "Sergeant," he said, voice low enough that the trees wouldn't carry it. "Are there people in here?" He was trying to be quiet. McKinney's face folded. He didn't answer at once. The group felt the awkward, bone-deep pause of a man looking down a long list of sins. Everybody stared at him. Before he could speak, a woman's scream ripped the night open. "Help!" Raw and ragged and full of more than pain. The kind of scream that carried desperation and pleas in its edges. The kind of scream that carried desperation and pleas in its edges. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide open. Madeline grabbed Rose's sleeve. Somewhere in the back of the group, a young child had started to cry and was hushed. McKinney swallowed, like he was forcing down a stone. When he finally spoke, his voice was paper thin. "Yes, there's been people here, families." The words landed like a thrown stone in a still pond. Ripples of horror spread across each face. "You mean refugees the Catholics took in?" George asked. "Yes, refugees," McKinney repeated. His eyes went to the ground. "Immigrant families. People looking for shelter. His throat worked. "We housed them on upper levels, then we brought them lower." Jack's knuckles whitened on the axe. "You brought them here?" McKinney looked up, and the light in his eyes was a confession. "Into the labyrinth." He said the name like it was a curse. "They told us it was testing, that the labyrinth would spare the faithful." Prince Saphius, his mouth closed. He swallowed. He called it feeding. A silence fuller than any sound pressed down on them. Jack's voice came out like a boulder. "You fed people to whatever lives in here?" McKinney collapsed a little under the weight of the truth. "We moved them through the gates. I signed the orders. I escorted families. I told them they were being relocated.
I told mothers their children would be safe. He broke off, hands shaking as though nothing he said now could make the world right. I did it. Evelyn staggered back as if struck. You did what? You bastard! She started to whisper, then shouted uncontrollably. There's a baby out there right now! A sacrifice, McKinney said. The word was a burning coal. They told us this place demanded it. They told us that Chimera had to be fed, or the Labyrinth would turn out unto the world. I believed the orders. I believed the Cardinal. I believed the promises. It was the only way to contain in here, underground. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes. When he spoke again, it was softer, rawer. I helped shepherd them to the doors. I heard the mothers begging. I heard the babies, and He could not finish. A child's muffled sob crawled through the line of people like a worm through soil. Jack took one hard step forward, so close his breath fogged in the torchlight. How many? His voice was not angry now, only exhausted with the scale of it. McKinney's shoulders sagged. Dozens. Hundreds. We kept lists at first, then it became a number instead of faces. George's hands balled into fists. He looked at the trees the way a man looks at a wound he can't touch. How do you look at yourself? Or sleep at night? He asked, not really wanting an answer. McKinney's laugh was a small, broken thing. I haven't slept in years. A wind moved through the branches then, sounding almost like whispered voices. The bell dinged again, closer this time, as if whatever lurked in that place had noticed the confession. As the bell sounded, so did the wails of the infant, distant yet haunting. Then another scream from the woman. Get away from us! A man detached from the group at the edge of the torchlight. He was younger than most of them, his leather chest plate worn thin, a Roman gladius slung at his back like a relic from some other war. He had a shield with a dent that spoke of past wars. The man was the town's local mechanic, Miguel. Rose recognized him from their small Oregon town. If that cry is true, he said, voice steady as the blade being drawn from his sheath, then someone is still alive in there, or someone else is hunting them, or something else after them out there in the dark. I'm going to help. Miguel was a bigger guy, and he wanted to show the sergeant what he thought of him. But the cry sounded again. Wailing from the child, hoarse and raspy, like the child had been crying for days. Then the terrified, help me, from a woman, echoed strongly, closer now. He looked at McKinney with a simple kind of verdict. You can carry guilt until it kills you, Sergeant, or you can try to undo it. Jack's eyes slid to the newcomer. What's your name, son? Miguel, the young man said. Jack breathed once, slow. The axe lowered a fraction. Miguel, I'll go with you. I'm not letting a child die because men in robes decided purification needs lambs. He looked at George. We either march together or we let them die alone out there. George's face tightened, and then opened into something like resolve. He stepped forward, placing himself beside Jack. Evelyn was shaking now, tears making tracks through the grime on her cheeks. She found her voice on a thread. George, I'm not letting you leave without me. McKinney fell to his knees, the confession leaving him breathless. Take me with you, he begged before the words could be censored by shame. I can show you the way. I can. I'll do anything. Let's find that woman and her baby. Jack's look at him was 2 parts pity and 1 part hard truth. The young Miguel did not hesitate. He slid his shield up and glanced at the trees, chasing after a mother's plea and the child's cry. I can hear them still. He set his jaw. Let's go now, before it's too late. He used his shield to crash through the trees, lower branches. Jack shouldered his axe. Then we go, jogging after him. As they quickly stepped into the dark, 2 human silhouettes swallowed by the timber and mud. The bell dinged once, soft and indifferent. The woman's scream cut again, a ragged thread of sound, and somewhere farther in the labyrinth the baby cried on and on. George watched as Miguel and Jack vanished into the shadows of the forest.
their forms quickly swallowed by the dark, just two determined silhouettes pushing past branches and fog. They had no rifles, no radios, just Jack's old axe and Miguel's battered gladius and shield, and something deeper still, conviction. George felt a strange ache in his chest, a cocktail of admiration, fear, and guilt. It was like watching soldiers march into a burning building, knowing they might never come back. Then, movement. Sergeant McKinney pushed himself up, rifle in hand, his wild hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. He brushed it back and turned to face the group, face pale but jaw locked. "Men," he barked, voice gravel with shame. "Those of you brave enough to come with me. Let's go rescue that woman and child." The tone in his voice shifted something. The townspeople looked to the soldiers. Half a dozen of them immediately stepped forward. They didn't speak, they didn't nod, they just moved, weapons ready, silent and resolved. The others hesitated. One soldier, ranked higher than the rest, chest heavy with brass, shook his head. "If we leave the marked path, those things will pick us off one by one. I've heard stories. Stuff out there doesn't bleed normal." A few more men murmured in agreement. Fear was infectious. McKinney didn't flinch. He simply turned his back on the doubters and began walking into the glowing woods, the small band of volunteers behind him. One soldier from the hesitating group spat and muttered, "Screw this. I didn't sign up for some suicidal side quest. Who's with me?" Several peeled off with him, heading toward the broader, better-lit corridor. The rest of the civilians were left standing in a confused cluster, some trembling, others just stunned. And then, ding! A final bell rang behind George. He spun just in time to see a flash of motion near the tree line. Madeline, who had just sat down moments before, let out a high-pitched scream. A grotesque skeletal hand, long and bony, with sickle-like fingers, shot out from behind a tree. It latched onto Madeline's arm with inhuman speed and yanked. She didn't even have time to scream again. Her legs kicked out as she was ripped off the ground, dragged backwards like a rag doll into the shadows. Leaves and pine needles exploded around her as her body disappeared into the dark. "Madeline!" George roared, already sprinting. Evelyn was right behind him, her boots pounding the earth. Rose drew her pistol and leveled it, but she froze, afraid to shoot blindly. Her hands trembled. "Oh, God, help her!" Rose cried, voice cracking with panic. She stuffed the pistol back into her coat and chased them, her breath short and frantic. George charged into the forest, ducking under low limbs and shoving through brush, heart thundering in his ears. The trees blurred as he ran, focused only on the direction she'd vanished. The wailing of the baby, the screams of the mother, they had stopped. Now there was silence, followed by dull crashing of branches and leaves. It wasn't long before George realized the horrible truth. Whatever had taken Madeline was moving faster than any human ever could. Her screams were still echoing, but they were slipping farther away with every breath, each one fainter, thinner, as if being pulled into the throat of the earth itself. The thing that had her wasn't just running, it was gliding, like death on rails. George's blood burned like acid. He pushed harder, legs hammering the forest floor, lungs tearing in his chest. Leaves slapped his face and branches clawed at his arms, but he didn't stop, not for a second. Then his boot caught. A hidden root snagged him mid-stride and sent him sprawling. He hit the ground hard, face first into cold moss and dirt. Air exploded from his lungs. Pain flashed through his ribs and shoulder. He lay there stunned for just a breath. Then he heard it again. Madeline's scream, farther now, but still real. George forced himself up, wheezing, staggered to one knee, then the other. He grit his teeth and brushed blood from his brow. He rose just as Evelyn and Rose came crashing through the trees behind him. "George!" Evelyn cried, grabbing his arm. Rose stumbled to a stop beside them, panic written across her face. "Madeline!" Rose shouted, cupping her hands around her mouth. Her voice rang out into the forest like a beacon. The trees answered back. Branches snapped somewhere up ahead. Leaves rustled violently to their left, and then came the whispers. Low, inhuman, like a choir of insects murmuring prayers to something older than time. The bell rang again. Ding!
Where was it coming from? Goosebumps rose on Evelyn's neck. A single note, deep and cold, like it had been struck beneath the soil. The three of them froze, straining their ears, hearts hammering in sync. For a long moment, nothing. Then, bang! A single gunshot cracked through the trees like a lightning strike. George's breath hitched. It came from the direction Madeline had been taken. "Come on," he said, no longer asking. He broke into a sprint, and Evelyn and Rose followed, feet pounding the forest floor, adrenaline numbing the ache. The path ahead twisted wildly now, marked only by broken branches and the faint trace of a scream that had stopped too suddenly. Whatever lay ahead. George had just used all his strength, forcing himself to run after falling. Breath shallow, every nerve thrumming like a taut wire. The shotgun blast still echoed somewhere behind his ribs, a phantom boom that seemed to pulse through the trees. He wasn't thinking, only moving. His flashlight swung wildly in his hand, throwing fractured arcs of light into the darkness. Evelyn and Rose were already running. Another scream rose ahead, sharp, guttural, unmistakably Madeline's. It tore through the night like a wound. George's legs kicked harder. Branches crawled at their coats as they burst into the clearing, but what stopped them wasn't the terrain, it was the sight. The flashlight beam hit a figure, and for a moment none of them moved. It was enormous. Not in the way of muscle or bulk, but in wrongness. It towered, draped in what had once been a robe, now torn and filthy and barely clinging to a warped frame. The creature's body seemed pulled from a dozen nightmares. Joints bent the wrong way, limbs stretched beyond human proportion, skin that looked patchworked, scaled in places, raw in others, blackened in some. And its face, if it had once been human, that memory long since rotted away. The mouth hung open like a torn seam, teeth jagged and mismatched, eyes sunken deep into a skull that didn't belong to any species on Earth. Its foot, clawed, heavy, was planted squarely on Madeline's chest. She was pinned beneath it, one arm twitching, the other still locked around her shotgun. Her face was smeared with dirt and blood, her jaw clenched tight, lips moving soundlessly. George stepped forward. The creature shifted its head toward him. Then Madeline moved. There was no roar, no scream, only the clumsy, trembling turn of her wrists, the soft click of a finger finding the trigger, and the whisper of her breath. "No, not like this." She pulled it. The blast tore through the monster's chest at close range. It didn't stumble. It didn't cry out. It simply collapsed, as if strings had been cut. The body slammed forward, falling over her in one final grotesque offering. Everything fell still. Then, "Help me get it off her!" George's voice broke the paralysis. He dropped to his knees, hands already on the thing's shoulder. "Now!" Rose didn't hesitate. She was there, pressing against the creature with her whole body, tears running freely. Evelyn moved in beside them, sleeves rolled up, face hard. The three of them heaved, groaning under the weight, until the beast's corpse rolled off and landed with a sick, wet thud. Madeline wasn't moving. George reached for her. "Maddie." Her body jolted. She gasped, coughing hard, one hand flying to her throat, the other crawling at the dirt. Her eyes opened wide and unfocused, her chest rising and falling too fast, like a bird just rescued from a trap. Then she looked at the thing beside her, and reality caught up. Her breath hitched, her lips parted, and she leaned to one side and vomited into the soil. Rose cradled her before she even finished, pulling her in like she was 5 years old. "It's okay," she whispered over and over. "It's okay, baby, you're safe. I've got you." Madeline trembled in her arms, silent, wet-cheeked, still holding the shotgun with bloodless fingers. George stood slowly, flashlight raised again. The body was still there, still massive, still obscene. Up close it looked even less real, like something half-formed, rejected by creation. But beneath all the twisted sinew and bone, you could see traces of a man. Just enough to make you sick. Near its foot, something glinted faintly. George stepped closer, crouched, and pulled it free from the dirt. A small crucifix, bent, tarnished, the chain broken. Evelyn came to stand beside him. She said nothing at first, just stared. Then, someone let themselves become that in the lake. George nodded once. Or they were made. I'm not sure. A long silence settled. Somewhere in the woods, branches shifted. A low, strange call, not quite animal, not quite human, floated in on the breeze. Rose looked up, her voice steady but hollow. They know we're here now. Madeline staggered back, clutching her ribs, her breath shallow and quick. The air itself seemed poisoned, thick in her lungs. She whispered to no one in particular, as if confessing to the trees. This can't be real. This can't be real. I must be dreaming. George's hand found her shoulder for only a second, grounding her before he knelt beside the carcass sprawled at their feet. His flashlight trembled in his grip as he angled the beam toward its claw. The thing's hand was not flesh as God had made flesh. Its joints were tangled with ridges of iron, dull and corroded, clicking faintly as he nudged them with the toe of his boot. The sound was haunting, like a broken wind chime dangling in the dark. George swallowed hard, his voice low, more to himself than anyone else. So that's it, he muttered. That's the sound we kept hearing. He looked up at Evelyn. In the moss light, her face looked fragile, ethereal, like something caught between this world and the next, but her eyes held steady. George's jaw tightened. We're in trouble. Maybe this is worse than I imagined. Her lips parted just enough to breathe a whisper that trembled with faith. George, we've been in trouble. God's carried us every step. He'll carry us now. Tears fell down her face. The words barely passed between them before the forest exploded. Branches snapped like bones breaking. The ground trembled beneath a weight that did not belong here. From the thicket, it came. At first it was just a shadow, massive, shifting, wrong. Then the shape emerged, a hulking body shrouded in matted fur, its head a reptilian horror, teeth jagged like broken glass, its eyes burned yellow, fixed on them with a hunger that felt eternal. It was half slithering, half crawling, with two front paws. Evelyn gasped. George reached Madeline, sobbing like a child in the night. Her voice cracked. No, 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 as she jumped to her feet and ran to Rose. George's bow was in his hands before the thought even reached him. He drew. The string creaked under the strain, his chest rising once, steadying. He loosed. The arrow struck deep, quivering from the beast's chest. For one dreadful instant, silence fell, as if creation itself waited to see the outcome. Then it roared, and went for the dead monstrosity laying in front of them all. It made a howling sound as George fired another arrow. It didn't even flinch. The sound was not animal. It was ancient, hellish, a blast that shook the marrow of every bone in their body. The thing did not fall. It did not stumble. George's voice split the air. Run! They didn't think, they ran. The forest spun past in streaks of shadow and pale moss light. Every heartbeat was a hammer of fear. Behind them came the sound of feeding. Wet, savage, grotesque. The beast had chosen its prey. It tore into the fallen corpse, rending flesh from bone in a frenzy. The sound of splintering ribs echoed through the labyrinth like a drumbeat of hell. They ran for 20 minutes straight. It did not follow. It found its meal. By the time they stumbled back into the cluster of townsfolk, lungs burning, every face was a mask of terror. What was that? Someone cried out, voice breaking. What was all that shouting? George drew in a breath to answer, then froze. There's a beast. It's feeding on one of those things in the forest. We saw what it was. We killed the one that took Madeline. The townspeople erupted into 100 questions all at once, until another voice slipped into the clearing, a voice that did not belong. Rose. It was soft, familiar, a husband's voice. Rose, my darling, are you there? Rose stiffened as if lightning had struck her. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling. "That voice," she whispered, more to herself than others. "It's him. It's my husband. I know that voice. It's my husband's voice." She didn't flinch as she started into the forest, after the familiar tone. Madeline spun towards her, her young face blotched with tears, her hands gripping Rose's arm. "Grandma, no, no, he's gone. He's been gone so long. That's not him. It can't be." But Rose's eyes, shimmering with grief and desperate hope, stared into the shadows. She lifted a trembling hand as if reaching for something only she could see. "I see him," she breathed. "Just there, waiting for me." "Grandma!" Madeline's voice broke into a scream, raw and childlike. She wrapped both arms around her grandmother's waist, tears streaming hot. "Don't, please, please don't go to him. Don't leave me. Those things are out there." George stepped in, his hand like iron on Rose's other arm. His voice was the voice of a father, a soldier, of a man who had stared death in the eyes. "Rose," he said, his tone hard, each word meant to pierce through the illusion. "That voice is not your husband. This place knows our wounds. It uses them. If you step toward that shadow, it'll take you. You won't be coming back." Rose's lips quivered. The voice came again, dripping tenderness. "Rose, help me. My leg is acting up again," the voice called. Her knees buckled. Her heart was breaking. The group held their breath. Time seemed to collapse into a single choice. "Let's just keep moving," George instinctively said. They all walked for the next hour, leaving the illusion, or whatever it was, behind. Yet it seemed to be following them. Its calls to Rose came less frequently, until ahead of them, a startling sound. The sound of breaking branches. Jack burst from the trees, gasping, his face gray with terror, his words spelled out like shards of glass. "We could save them, those things. They're not men. We couldn't save them. Those things, they're not men anymore. Claws like knives, faces stretched. Miguel tried to fight. God help me, he screamed for me, but it tore him apart. I ran. I had to." The old man Jack with his white beard collapsed into the pathway, the bioluminescent moss all around his lit face. George didn't move his hand from Rose's arm. Her voice cut through the stillness like a blade. "Jack, did you see a man that could be my husband? He's older, white hair, like yours," Rose asked with desperation in her voice. Jack shook his head, haunted eyes hollow. "I heard shouting, but when death is behind you, you don't stop to look back." Rose cried silently. "Lord help me," she pleaded softly. They all agreed to keep moving, following the path ahead that glowed faintly, the bioluminescent moss casting their faces in spectral light. Every shadow seemed alive in the forest around them, every voice in the distance a snare. George's gaze swept over them, Evelyn pale but steady, Madeline clinging like a child at the edge of despair, Rose trembling on the knife's edge of hope and delusion. His voice was iron. "Stay close. Don't listen to the voices. Don't believe what you see. If we stop now, we die here." And with that he stepped forward into the haunted glow, the others falling in behind him, the voice still whispering from the forest like a ghost they could not outrun. They moved as if through water, every step heavy with the weight of fear and the echoes of the voice that trailed them. Rose's eyes darted back, drawn to that haunting call, her husband's voice now pleading as if in pain. "Rose, I need you. You know my bad knee. You can't leave me here." The voice twisted like a knife of memory. It knew exactly where to cut, and Rose's resolve wavered, her eyes shimmering with the painful mix of hope and confusion. She pressed her trembling hand over her face, whispering through tears, "Lord, please make it stop." George glanced at her as they walked. The look in her eyes cut him deeper than any blade. It was the gaze of a woman tormented by love that had been ripped from her, only to be dangled before her again without mercy. Something unholy was at work. Rose clenched her jaw, whispering almost to herself, "Get behind me, Satan." Her voice cracked, but she forced one foot in front of the other, clinging to the rhythm of survival. From the crowd, a man's voice broke in. "Wait a minute. What if that really is her husband out there?" His tone was more curious than cruel, trying to reason out the impossible. Another voice chimed in, sharper. "Hold on, lady. You're the one who said it was your husband. He just said he needed help. So what if he's really out there calling for you? You're just gonna leave him?" The middle-aged man who'd spoken last hurried up to catch up with Rose. He stepped in front of her, his palm raised like a stop sign. "Hey, listen to yourself. You heard him. He's out there. He's hurt. What if—" Rose shook her head violently, hands clamped over her ears. No, it's not him." Her voice was hoarse, a whisper caught between faith and despair. She wouldn't look at the man. Her chin was down, tears streaking across her face. She pressed them hard. Her hands she pressed harder against her ears. The man leaned closer, his voice rising with urgency. "But what if it is him? What if you're abandoning your—" Suddenly George's hand was on his chest, shoving him hard. The man's eyes widened as his feet tangled beneath him. He hit the stone path with a sickening thud, air rushing from his lungs. "Leave her alone!" George's voice thundered. His chest heaved, his jaw set like granite. "Hey, what the hell, man?" The fallen man spat dust as he scrambled back up, his voice cracking between outrage and fear. "What's your problem?" Evelyn erupted. "Go see for yourself if that's what you think. Can't you see she's barely keeping it together here?" Madeline screamed into the forest behind them. "Leave my grandma alone! Leave us alone! I know you're not my grandpa!" Rose grabbed Madeline's wrist and pulled her back from the edge of the black woodland. "Let's just keep going, Madeline," she said, her voice low and urgent. The trees ahead were breathing shadows, their trunks slick with moisture that caught the dim glow of the labyrinth's false sky. The group pressed onward, their steps heavy, their shoes dragging through the wet loam. Every sound, the crunch of gravel, the creak of leather straps, seemed amplified in the silence that followed them. Rose kept one hand pressed to her ear, trying to drown out the whisper of her husband's voice from the darkness. "Rose." It came faintly now, more pleading than before. "Please, I need you." Her breath hitched. The ache in the voice felt real. Too real. And yet she knew it couldn't be. Not here. A middle-aged man trudged a few paces behind her, pointed accusingly through the dim light. "Lady, you said it yourself. That can't be him. You've got to ignore that." Another woman clutched her shawl tighter, her eyes wide and glassy. "This place is playing tricks on us," she whispered, her words trembling. "It's reading our minds." Then George stopped so abruptly that Evelyn almost collided with him. His flashlight beam froze on the tangled underbrush. "Wait, did you hear that?" The air held its breath, and then, "Mom, Dad?" The voice was thin, broken but unmistakable. "I'm hurt, please. Help me, I'm down here." Evelyn's face went white. George's heart slammed against his ribs. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The voice had Sarah's pitch, Sarah's desperation, the same tone she'd used when she was little and scraped her knees. George took a few hesitant steps toward the sound. "Evelyn, it sounded just like her." "George, no." Evelyn's voice came out firm but shaking. "We can't be tricked by this place. You saw what happened to Madeline. It's the labyrinth. It's feeding on us, on what we love most." "But what if she's here?" George's hand trembled around the flashlight. The idea that his daughter might be down here, alone and hurt, clawed at every fiber of his being. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes locking onto him with quiet fire. "And what if it's not? If you go chasing that voice, we lose you too." She took his hand and squeezed hard, grounding him. "We have to keep going, for the real Sarah, the one waiting for us above ground." Behind them, the forest seemed to awaken. All around, the others began to hear voices of their own. Lost children, dead parents, lovers calling from the mist. The air shimmered with the weight of grief and longing, each cry another snare for the soul. George swallowed hard, forcing his eyes back to the narrow, winding path ahead. "You're right," he said quietly. "We stay the course." Evelyn nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She whispered under her breath, barely audible, "Get behind me, Satan." The words carried like a prayer through the damp air. Rose, hearing them, mouthed the same verse as if echoing a secret code of survival. And together, hearts pounding, spirits frayed but unbroken, they pressed forward, refusing to heed to the voices that trailed them through the dark. The path wound deeper into the glowing woodland, its faint blue light flickering across their faces like candle flames in a storm. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of moss and something metallic. Blood, maybe, though none of them dared to name it.
They moved as one, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravelly soil, until a man in his 40s, stocky, wearing a torn brown jacket and a cross pendant that swung against his chest, stopped dead in his tracks. His head tilted slightly, eyes wide and unfocused. "Wait, I hear her." Rose turned back, startled. "Who?" "My sister." His lips quivered. "Caroline. I hear her calling me." From somewhere beyond the tree line, faint and melodic, a woman's voice drifted through the mist. "Daniel, please, it's me. I'm lost." George's stomach tightened. He grabbed the man by the collar.
"No, don't go, man. It's a trap. Do you hear me? That's not her."
The man's face twisted between terror and hope.
"Get off me. You don't understand. I can hear her. She's calling for me."
He shoved George's hand away and stumbled backwards, eyes locked on the glowing thicket ahead as if it were a doorway to heaven itself.
"Caroline!"
he shouted, running full tilt into the darkness. His boots splashed through a shallow puddle.
"I'm here. Just wait for me. Don't do this,"
George called after him, his voice breaking with urgency. But the man didn't slow. His flashlight beam vanished between the trees, swallowed whole by the mist. The group listened, hearts pounding. For a moment all was still. Then the forest growled. It was a deep, layered sound, like stone grinding beneath the earth, mixed with the rumble of beasts too large to belong in this world. The man's cries turned from relief to sheer panic.
"No, no! There's too many of them!"
Muzzle flashes lit up the dark. 1, 2, 3, each burst carving a silhouette of horror between the trees. Then silence. No one spoke. Faces were pale, eyes hollow. The weight of it pressed on them all. The labyrinth had taken another soul. Evelyn reached for George's hand. Her grip was cold but steady. "We keep moving," she whispered, her voice trembling with faith and fear in equal measure. "We don't look back." George nodded, his throat tight.
"God help us,"
he said softly. The forest trail had narrowed to a ledge beside the river, a living, roaring thing that carved its way through the heart of the labyrinth. The water cascaded down the unseen heights, the current white and wild. Smashing against black stone, mist hung heavy in the air, glowing faintly from the bioluminescent moss that grew on every surface. They could only walk one by one now. The drop on one side fell into a churning river. On the other, twisted trees loomed with roots like serpents. The group had stopped talking hours ago. All that remained was the rhythmic crunch of boots, the rasp of breath, and the constant rush of the water beside them. At last, the voices that had haunted them, those whispers of loved ones calling from the shadows, had gone silent. In their place came the sound of life. Crickets, distant birds, even the flutter of wings somewhere above. It almost felt normal again. Then came a howl. It rose from somewhere far off, long, mournful, and deep enough to vibrate in their bones. The sound seemed to travel along the river, bouncing off the stone walls of the canyon until no one could tell where it came from. Some of the townspeople stopped walking.
"Maybe we should rest,"
one murmured. Evelyn glanced back at the group. They were pale, trembling, utterly spent. George could see it too. His wife's face lined with concern, her breath fogging faintly in the cold air.
"All right," he said softly. 5 minutes, but stay sharp."
They gathered near the bank where the path widened slightly. The river was a blur of white water and shifting color, reflecting the faint blue light from the forest above. Flish flickered beneath the surface, darting like silver sparks, but every so often something larger moved under the current, a shadow that didn't follow the rhythm of the water. Rose knelt and offered Madeline a drink, her trembling hand betraying the calm she tried to project. Evelyn passed George a bottle, and for a moment the world was still. Just the sound of rushing water and the whisper of wind through fallen leaves. Then another howl answered first. Closer. This time the birds did not return to song. The forest went utterly still. Rose's eyes lifted toward the ridge above them. "They're out there," she whispered. Shapes moved between the trees, quick, fluid, hunched. At first they thought they were wolves, but then the moonlight caught their hides and the illusion shattered. The creatures slinked forward on 4 limbs, but their skin gleamed like armor, scales overlapping where fur should have been. Their muzzles were elongated, filled with serrated teeth, and their eyes burned with a sickly gold light.
"Stay together,"
George hissed, rising to his feet. His hand went to the bow strapped across his back. Madeline gripped her shotgun. Rose drew her revolver. Evelyn took up position beside George, scanning the tree line. The first creature stepped into the open, its claws scraping rock. It didn't rush them. It watched, head tilted slightly as though curious. Then another appeared beside it. Then another, their glowing eyes flickering through the mist. One of the younger men in the group whispered, "They're sizing us up." The lead wolf creature growled, deep and guttural. Its throat pulsed as if something crawled beneath the skin. George raised his bow.
"If they charge, aim for the eyes."
Then the first one lunged. Its movement was so fast it blurred, a streak of scales and claws. George fired instinctively, the arrow sinking deep into its chest. The thing shrieked, tumbling back into the mud, thrashing violently before collapsing. Gunfire exploded around them. Madeline's shotgun roared, the blast echoing through the canyon. Evelyn dropped to one knee, firing in measured bursts, each shot cracking through the mist. The wolves attacked in waves. One bounded over the fallen body, only to take a bullet through its jaw. Another slammed into a man near the edge of the trail, dragging him screaming toward the river. But Rose fired one clean shot that hit it square between the eyes. The beast dropped instantly, releasing its victim. The fight raged for what felt like minutes, the flashes of gunfire lighting the forest like lightning. When the smoke began to clear, the surviving creatures stood still among their dead, growling low. Their breath steamed in the cold air. Then slowly, the leader, a massive beast with a scar running down its snout, gave a single snarl and backed away. One by one the others followed, vanishing into the dark tree line as if melting into the earth. Silence fell again. The group stood motionless, listening for any sign of their return. The only sound was the pounding of their own hearts and the endless roar of the river beside them. George lowered his bow, breathing hard.
"Is everyone okay?"
Rose nodded shakily. "They're gone, for now." Evelyn exhaled, wiping sweat and soot from her cheek. "Let's move, before they change their minds." They gathered their things and pressed forward again, the narrow trail guiding them deeper along the river. The mist grew thicker, the air colder, and as they walked, the water beside them grew louder, until it wasn't just a river anymore, but a constant, living roar. At first, no one noticed the shift. The current pulsed, the surface rising and falling in strange rhythms. Then George slowed, frowning at the edge.
"Do you hear that?"
It wasn't just the water anymore. Something beneath it was breathing. A low vibration rippled through the ground, strong enough to rattle stones from the ledge. The river seemed to bulge upward, the current twisting unnaturally as if something vast were stirring below. Rose's voice trembled. "Please, tell me that's not—" The surface broke. A thick black tentacle rose from the water, dripping with filth. the edges lined with a jagged, saw-like ridges. It hovered in the air like a serpent, tasting the wind, before snapping forward. George barely had time to shout before it wrapped around his leg and yanked him off his feet, dragging him toward the river's edge. "George!" Evelyn screamed, dropping to the ground, grabbing his arm with both hands. He clawed at the mud, kicking wildly, but the thing's pull was relentless. "Shoot it!" he yelled through gritted teeth. Evelyn turned, firing once, then again, each shot cracking through the roar of the water. The tentacle recoiled, twitching violently before letting go. George scrambled back, soaked and shaking, his leg bleeding where the ridges had torn into him. But the river did not stop moving. More tendrils rose, glistening with slime and blood. Old Jack, the white-bearded townsman, let out a hoarse shout and swung his axe, cleaving one clean through. Black fluid spattered his coat. Another tendril lashed around a man near the rear of the group, pulling him screaming into the churning water. The river exploded upward as a massive shape emerged, a creature unlike any human eye were meant to see. Its head was broad and eyeless, its mouth a circular maw lined with spiraling rows of teeth, each spinning as it opened wide enough to swallow a man whole. The beast struck, dragging its prey below in a spray of crimson. The current turned red for only a moment before washing clean again, as if it had devoured even the memory of blood. George staggered to his feet, breathless. "We have to move." Evelyn grabbed his arm. "Not back, forward! Stay away from the river!" The group stumbled along the narrow path, firing blindly behind them. The forest alive with echoes, the howls of wolves returning in the distance, the monstrous churn of water, and the ceaseless whisper of the labyrinth itself. And through it all, George heard Evelyn's voice beside him, fierce and unshaken. "Keep your eyes on the path. God is still with us." The storm had thundered into full force above them. Cold rain fell in silver sheets, turning the narrow riverside trail into a slick, trembling vein of mud. The forest on either side pulsed with ghostly light. The moss and mushrooms that clung to the trunks glowed faintly blue, shimmering like dying embers. The group pressed on, about 40 souls now in all, walking in silence broken only by the rasp of their breath and the rush of the river. No one spoke of the monster, but they all knew it was still there. The river moved wrong. Its flow was too rhythmic, like something vast swam beneath the surface, pacing them. Every so often a bubble rose and burst with a hiss, or the water bulged outward as if something massive turned below. George led the way, flashlight cutting through the mist. Evelyn stayed just behind him, her hand occasionally brushing his sleeve, a silent tether to reality. Jack followed at the rear, broad-shouldered, his soaked flannel plastered to his back, the axe he carried gleaming dull silver in the rain. Madeline walked beside Rose, clutching her arm for warmth. She hadn't said a word in half an hour. Her lips were pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She was 13, and her world had turned into something that no child should have to see. "Keep close," Rose murmured, her voice barely audible above the rain. "If you slip, I've got you." Madeline nodded weakly. "I'm not gonna fall." The path was muddy. Evelyn looked over her shoulder. "You two doing all right back there?" Rose forced a small smile. "Still breathing." Jack gave a grunt. "That's more than some could say." The forest trembled. It started as a faint vibration in the soles of their boots, then deepened in a low rumble. Pebbles rolled down the slope. Branches swayed violently, though no wind passed. George turned, scanning the trees. "Everybody stop." They froze. The river beside them began to churn, waves rolling against the bank like a sea caught in a storm. The current darkened. A shape moved beneath it, massive, sinuous, almost beautiful in its terrible grace. Then the water exploded. A black tentacle erupted upward, slick with mud and rain, slamming down across the path. The impact shook the ground like an earthquake, throwing people to their knees. Screams broke out. "Go!" George shouted, grabbing Evelyn's arm. "Run! Stay on the trail!" The creature rose higher, a writhing silhouette against the lightning, its limbs coiling, its surface lined with jagged ridges that glimmered like razors. Jack swung his axe as one of the limbs whipped toward them, slicing through the arm with a shriek. He struck the base of it with all his strength, severing the end clean through. Black ichor splattered across his coat again.
Keep moving, he roared, voice breaking. Don't stop for anything.
They ran. The narrow trail turned to chaos, mud flying, people slipping and clawing their way forward. A woman screamed as the ground gave way beneath her. She slid into the water, vanishing in an instant. 2 men tried to pull her back, but another tentacle slammed between them, sweeping them both into the river. "Help me!" someone cried, their flashlight tumbling from their hand and spinning into the foam. The beam flickered once, and it was gone. Rose's grip on Madeline tightened until the girl whimpered. "Keep your eyes forward," she shouted, voice cracking. "Don't look back, baby, don't look, we've got to move." Evelyn reached for George's hand as the path split beneath them, and for a second they both felt the ground sag. "Jump!" she screamed. They leapt across the gap together. Mud tore at their boots. The river roared beneath. Behind them, half the group tried to follow, but the ledge crumbled, and 20 people were gone in a single, horrifying rush. The sound of their screams was swallowed by the storm. Then silence. Only the river and the monster's breath. Evelyn's leg gave out, and she fell to her knees, choking back sobs. "Oh, God," she whispered. "They're gone. They're all gone." George stood frozen, staring at the empty space where the path had been. He couldn't even bring himself to pray. Jack rested his axe in the mud, breathing hard. Rain streaked down his beard.
"We can't stay here," he said hoarsely. "That thing's not done with us."
Rose held Madeline close, both of them shaking. The girl's small voice trembled through the rain. "I heard them. The ones who fell, their screams, I still hear them." Rose's eyes filled. "It's just the water, sweetheart, just the water." But when she looked toward the river, the foam did seem to pulse with faint glowing shapes. Faces, maybe, or tricks of the light.
George tore his eyes away. "We have to keep going. Hurry now," he said.
The path led them, who were left, away from the river and the death inside of it. He turned, and that's when he saw it. A break in the hillside, half hidden between a curtain of roots and moss. A narrow stairwell of carved stone leaning downward, glowing faintly from within. The rain hissed on the steps as if the earth itself were exhaling. "Down there," Evelyn said, her voice barely more than a breath. "Maybe it'll take us away from the river." Jack tightened his grip on his axe.
"Or deeper into hell."
No one argued. The remaining townspeople walked down the staircase into the unknown. A dark tunnel lay ahead of them. They descended. The tunnel pressed in around them. It was made of ancient stone. Each breath came out white and trembling, hanging in the air for a heartbeat before fading into the dark. Their soaked clothes clung to their skin. Every step made a soft squelch. The faint blue light from the mushrooms in the tunnel shimmered along the floor, enough to see by, but not enough to feel safe. Madeline's teeth chattered. "It's so cold," she whispered. Her voice broke halfway through the sentence. Rose squeezed her shoulder gently. "I know, sweetheart. Just keep moving. The walking will help." Jack's voice carried from the back, low and steady.
"Can't walk forever. We need a place to stop before we drop."
Evelyn turned her flashlight down one of the branching tunnels ahead. The beam caught the gleam of dripping water on smooth walls. "This way widens out," she said. "Maybe a place to rest." George nodded, rubbing his hands together for warmth.
"We'll take 5, no longer."
He wanted to get this over, to get topside again, and get back to Sarah. His daughter could be in serious trouble. They moved into the wider space, a hollow where a tunnel split 3 ways. The ceiling arched high above them, lost in shadow. Water dripped steadily from the roots overhead, each drop echoing like the tick of a clock. The air was even colder here. It bit at their fingers, crawled down their necks, and sank into their bones. Jack set down his axe and knelt beside the wall, striking a spark from his flint. It hissed uselessly against the damp ground.
"The stone's too wet,"
he muttered. "Try one of the packs," Evelyn said. "There's a tarp in mine." "Try one of the packs," Evelyn said. "There's a tarp in mine." They spread the tarp against the cold floor and gathered close. Rose and Madeline wrapped in a blanket of emergency foil that crackled faintly. George and Evelyn crouched nearby. Jack sat cross-legged with his hands outstretched toward the tiny flame he finally coaxed from a match. It wasn't much, just a flicker, but it was light and it was human. Madeline sat staring at it, eyes glassy. "It doesn't even feel warm," she said. Rose pulled her close, rubbing her arms. "It will in a minute. Just stay still." The girl nodded, her breath forming thin clouds. For a few moments, no one spoke. The silence was thick, the kind that hums in your ears when you've been listening to too much noise. George finally whispered,
"We lost half of them."
No one answered. Evelyn reached for his hand. "We didn't lose everyone," she said softly. "We're still here." Jack kept his gaze on the flame.
"That thing in the river will come looking again," he said. "Nothing that big stops being hungry. What if it can come out of the river?"
Madeline whimpered quietly, and Rose shot him a look. "She doesn't need to hear that." Jack's jaw tightened, but he nodded.
"You're right. Sorry, kiddo."
Madeline wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "It's okay," she said. "I don't think it can fit down here." Her voice was so small that it broke something in Rose's chest. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to calm the tremor in her hands. "We'll find somewhere dry soon. Somewhere warm." Jack gave a dry chuckle.
"Warm? Down here?"
"Let her hope," Rose said quietly. "It's all she's got left." She grabbed a lighter out of her backpack and gave it to Madeline. "Warm your hands with this." They sat like that for a long while. 20 people gathered in a faint circle of light. Every flicker of flame reflected in eyes that were too tired to close. The fire from everyone's lighters hissed and spat occasionally, fighting for air. Water dripped from above and hissed when it hit the coals. The smell of smoke mixed with the metallic scent of wet stone. Evelyn leaned against George's shoulders, eyes half closed. "It's so quiet down here," she murmured. "I don't like it." George nodded faintly.
"Too quiet."
Rose stroked Madeline's hair absently. "Maybe the quiet's a gift," she said. "Maybe after everything out there, we're supposed to rest a while." Jack shifted, stretching his back with a groan.
"You call this resting?"
A few soft laughs rippled down the group. Tired, broken, but real. They all continued to move to a better, wider spot. They moved deeper into the tunnel, the air thick with moisture and fear. The echoes of what they'd seen, the thing with the tentacles, still clung to them like smoke after a fire. No one spoke. Their footsteps were hollow, ghost-like, swallowed by the dark. Then a woman stopped. Her face had gone pale, eyes wide with the memory of it. "I can't," she whispered, her voice cracked like breaking glass. "I can't go on. That thing? I've never seen anything so wrong. I just want to die here." Her husband pulled her close, his hands shaking against her arms. The children wrapped themselves around her legs, crying softly, their breath misting in the cold. She didn't move. She was a statue of terror, frozen in the half-light. A man farther down the line spoke.
"We need warmth. These lighters aren't enough to warm our hands,"
he said. His tone was low but firm.
"I've got dry clothes in my pack."
The others stirred, hesitantly. One by one they began to unpack what they had. Shirts, scarves, socks, anything dry enough to burn. Someone found a few chunks of damp wood near the wall. Another tore strips from an old blanket. They built a small mound, and a single spark became a fragile flame. The fire grew, its light pushing back the dark. Orange and gold danced over the stone, over their faces that looked older than they had an hour ago. Steam rose from their drying clothes, and the crackling echoed up through the tunnel. Then someone noticed it. A faint breath of air moving through the smoke. Ventilation. Somewhere above, there was a way out. The woman stared into the flames. Her lips parted. The light shimmered in her tears. "It's beautiful," she whispered. And it was. Around that fire something shifted. The fear was still there, crouched at the edges of the dark, but now it was matched by something else. Something alive. The fire didn't just warm them, it reminded them that they were still here. The tunnel exhaled. The smoke drifted upward, and hope, small, trembling, but real, rose with it. For a long time the group sat in silence, listening to the water drip in the dark. Each drop fell like a clock they no longer trusted. The air was so cold that every breath came out white, curling, fading, ghosts that disappeared before their eyes. Their bodies still trembled from the river. Mud streaked their clothes, and the smell of wet earth clung to them like another layer of skin. George sat closest to the fire's fading heart, turning a glowing ember with the tip of a stick. His thoughts drifted far above the stone ceiling, to the sky he couldn't see, to Sarah, to the flashes that had split the heavens open a night before. Across from him, Evelyn watched the same ember. Her lips moved faintly, whispering a prayer only God would hear in a place like this. Then, faintly, impossibly, came a sound. Not the wind, not echoes. Voices. Jack straightened. He found from when the townspeople dropped it, his rifle, half lifted.
"You hear that?"
The others turned. George rose slowly, raising the lantern. Its orange light slid along the cold stone, stretching shadows down the corridor. From the dark at the far end, two shapes emerged, small at first, then larger, staggering forward with uneven breaths. A man's voice called out, hoarse with trembling.
Wait, don't shoot! We're alive!"
Boots scraped at the wet stone. A few of the townsfolk raised rifles by reflex, then lowered them again when the newcomers stumbled into the light. A man, drenched, his arm bleeding, and a little girl no older than 10. She clung to him, barefoot, hair plastered across her face, shaking so violently she could barely stand. Evelyn gasped. "Dear Lord." George caught the man as he fell to his knees. The man coughed, spitting out river water.
"We fell in. Back near the bend. The wall gave way."
Another cough, harsher.
"It took her first. I went after."
Rose rushed forward with a blanket, wrapping it around the child.
"You poor thing, you're freezing."
The man looked up, eyes wild and alive.
"She went under twice. I thought she was gone, then I found her, caught in a pocket under the roots."
Jack crouched beside him.
"You swam through that current?"
The man let out a weak laugh.
4 years varsity swim team. Guess it finally paid off."
Evelyn smiled faintly through her tears. "You brought her back." Little girl's lips were blue, but she managed to whisper, "He said not to go. I didn't."
Not to let go.
"He said not to let go. I didn't." For a heartbeat no one spoke. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. George nodded.
"You did good, both of you."
They brought the pair back to the center of the chamber. Jack dug through his waterproof bag, pulling out a few dry shirts, an old torn map, and a handful of tinder. Soon a new flame caught. The orange light spread slowly, climbing the walls, chasing the darkness back a little further. Steam rose from their clothes, curling like incense toward the ceiling. Evelyn knelt beside the man, cleaning the gash on his arm. "What's your name?"
"Cole," he said. "This is Hannah."
Madeline gave the little girl a soft smile. "Hi." "Hi," the child murmured, barely awake. Jack passed Cole a canteen.
"Sip slow."
Cole obeyed, then exhaled, voice rough.
"Thought we were done for. That thing, whatever it was, grabbed at us again in the current. I just kept kicking. There was a break in the wall downstream, some kind of drain. It led us here."
George studied him.
"You didn't see it follow?"
Cole shook his head.
"No, I think it stayed with the river."
"Then thank God for that." Rose whispered. The fire snapped, scattering sparks across the stone. Warmth began to settle over them, tentative, like a memory of sunlight. Evelyn rubbed her hands together in front of the flames. Feels like we've been down here for years. Jack chuckled dryly.
Feels like the years followed us down. You telling me it's only been a day?
Rose gazed into the fire, her face half lit, half shadow. Does anyone remember the sky before all this? Silence. The question hung there unanswered, as the fire burned brighter, defying the dark. The fire flickered weakly in the hollow, painting tired faces in amber and shadow. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic beats, like the ticking of a clock that no longer kept time. George turned to Evelyn, his voice low but steady.
We're just gonna go one step at a time. We can rest here for now. I think everybody needs it. I feel like we've been down here forever, but if we can get to that lake, where the gravity lift is, we could get back to the surface and start making our way back to Sarah. Leave this nightmare behind us.
His eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, not with fear, but with the kind of stubborn hope that refuses to die even when everything else has. Evelyn nodded, her voice trembling just a little. It feels like that thing in the river, those wolves, those things in the forest that almost took Madeline away from us. Her fingers brushed the small silver cross at her neck, slick with condensation. It caught a shard of firelight, trembling the way her voice did. Rose sat nearby, her knees drawn to her chest, eyes lost in the flame's reflection. That thing in the forest. It's a nightmare, she whispered. I don't know what's next, but I just want to get out of here. For a while no one spoke. The sound of the dripping water mingled with the faint crackle of the fire, fragile, defiant, alive. In that small circle of warmth surrounded by endless cold stone, they felt something stir. Not quite courage, not quite peace, but the quiet promise that if they kept walking, God would still be ahead of them, waiting beyond the darkness. Cole sat in the corner tending to his arm, while his daughter Hannah clung close. There was a quiet ripple of relief among the group. Someone else had made it out of the river, a small miracle in itself. Cole spoke, his voice carrying over the soft crackle of the fire.
The nukes went off, but we were already in the shelter. All we saw was it on the news. Everybody saw it on the news. What's that going to be like when we get to the top side? Are the vehicles even going to work with that nuclear blast that went off? In the Gulf, or over the ocean by New York?
He shook his head, the firelight flickering in his weary eyes.
It's going to be chaos when we get out of there. When we get out there. But it'll probably feel easy compared to this.
A few nodded silently, too tired to argue. The sound of the dripping tunnel filled the pauses between their breaths. As he spoke, everyone began rummaging through their packs, checking what food they had left, the weight of survival pressing down again. Hours drifted by as they rested, lying on their packs, most using them as pillows, some quietly changing out of their wet river clothes into dry ones, though the air still carried the scent of rain and stone. As the fire burned low, casting long shadows across the curved walls, one by one their voices faded to silence. As the hours wore on, many dozed off, finally finding a sliver of peace. George stayed awake, sitting near the embers, watching the faint rhythm of their breathing. He reached out and gently nudged Evelyn, Rose, and Madeline.
Look,
he whispered. The tunnel ahead seemed to glow faintly, as if morning had somehow found them underground. Bioluminescent fungi along the walls pulsed softly, as though the earth itself were breathing, steady, alive, and strangely peaceful. Slowly everyone stirred, gathering their things, murmuring softly to each other. The air felt different now, cleaner somehow, touched by the faint hum of unseen currents deeper ahead. Old Man Jack, who had kept the fire alive through the night, smiled faintly as he tossed another scrap of cloth into the fading flame.
Let's not waste the light, he murmured.
The last sparks fluttered like fireflies, and for a moment it almost felt like dawn. As the group pressed on, their footsteps echoed through the ancient tunnel, a corridor of forgotten craftsmanship. The walls were carved with intricate runes, spiraling patterns that seemed to pulse faintly in the glow of their lanterns. No one could read them, yet everyone felt them, a language older than words, humming with memory. Hours passed beneath those silent inscriptions. The air grew warmer. The stone floors began to slope upward. Then, faintly at first, came a sound none of them heard in days. Birdsong. Ahead, light spilled through a jagged mouth of stone. The chirping grew clearer, joined by the low, distant moo of something alive. A few townspeople froze, whispering in disbelief. George raised a hand, steady but cautious.
"Stay prepared for anything,"
he said, glancing at Evelyn, Rose, and Madeline. His tone carried both warning and wonder. They stepped out, and the world changed. Before them stretched a vast green pasture, bright as morning though no sun could be seen. Cow-like creatures grazed lazily in the fields, their hides streaked with faint metallic hues that caught the strange light. Birds darted between crystalline trees, and squirrel-like animals with feathered tails chittered from the branches. Madeline ran to catch up with George. "Those look like cows," she said, half laughing in disbelief. From the tall grass, a small bunny hopped towards her, its babies close behind. Its body shimmered faintly under the light. It had scales instead of fur, delicate and glistening like fish skin, yet somehow still soft, still innocent. Madeline smiled. "It's kind of cute." A butterfly with 4 luminous wings drifted through the air, glowing faintly like embers in a dream. It landed on Evelyn's arm. She gasped softly, lifting it toward the light, and when it took off, its wings shimmered into nothing, leaving only a faint trail of gold dust behind. The air smelled of wildflowers and warm earth, a cruel contrast to the darkness they had just escaped. At the far end of the pasture, the ground narrowed into a precarious stone path. The river thundered on one side, and the other, molten rock flowed in a slow, ominous ribbons. The stones were large enough for one person at a time, slick with mist and heat. The path stretched about 50 yards, leading to a flat rise near the lake, and beyond that something extraordinary shimmered on the hill. A spiral column of light, rising and twisting like liquid glass, its colors shifting from deep blue to violet to silver. The gravity lift. They made their way through the towering grass towards it. The cow-like creatures barely noticed them, grazing in peace while the wind whispered through the blades like waves on a distant shore. George stopped at the edge of the stone path. The group gathered close behind him. The air vibrated faintly, like the moment before it, a lightning strike. Below, the lava hissed and churned, far beneath their feet, while the river on the other side roared with relentless fury. The narrow causeway between the two forces of nature looked less like a path and more like a divine test. George set his jaw, eyes locked on the radiant tower ahead.
"Only one of us go at a time,"
he said quietly. He looked down once more, one side fire, the other water, and then ahead, to the light that pulsed like the breath of heaven. The gravity lift waited, beautiful, otherworldly, a dream of escape suspended between 2 abysses. As the group carefully made their way along the narrow stone path, everything seemed to be going smoothly. The gravity lift glowed in the distance, drawing them forward with every careful step. Its spiral shimmer painted their faces in cold blue and violent light, a promise of freedom almost close enough to touch. Then, from the far side of the lake, voices broke through the eerie calm. A group of soldiers and townspeople, the ones who had gone ahead at the start of the labyrinth, emerged from a broad, unnatural-looking path that had appeared near the water's edge. They looked battered, hollow-eyed, moving as if sleepwalking. There was something strange in their expressions, reverence, almost worship, as they approached the lake. One of the soldiers, his face smeared with dirt and blood, caught sight of George and the others. His voice, ragged and hollow, echoed across the water.
"Well, look who it is, the townspeople," he called, lips curling into a grim, unhinged smile. "Just in time for the show. We're going to be transformed."
Before anyone could respond, he and the others walked straight into the water, as if under a spell. Their figures vanished beneath the shimmering surface. His voice carried one last time, muffled but clear.
"The lake will change us, just like Prince Saphia's nocturne."
The surface began to churn. The light from the gravity lift reflected in the ripples, distorting into writhing shapes. From the edges of the lake, shadows began to rise. Humanoid, winged, grotesque. Giant bird-like creatures unfurled themselves from the reeds, part human, part pterodactyl. Their bodies stretched by agony, their wings leathery and vast. Their screeches tore through the cavern, echoing like trumpets from some twisted revelation. The first soldier broke the surface, screaming. His body convulsed and bent at impossible angles, bones cracked and reformed. His teeth jutted like knives, his skin blistered, and as he reached for help, a winged creature swooped down, claws sinking into his flesh, and flung him back into the depths. The beast circled overhead, eyes locking onto the survivors. George reacted instantly, raising his bow. Arrows whistled through the air, finding wings and limbs, but for every creature that fell, 2 more rose. The narrow stone path left no room to dodge, forcing the group into a desperate, single-file run. Gunfire erupted from behind as some of the townspeople fired into the swarm. Muzzle flashes flickered like lightning over the lava below. The cow-like creatures in the pasture fled into the glowing forest, their frightened cries echoing through the chaos. Rose clutched Madeline's hands as one of the beasts dove toward them. Its claws scraped inches from their heads. Evelyn swung her M1 Garand wildly, smashing one in the face. The thing hissed and veered off, shrieking into the smoke-filled air. A man behind them was lifted, screaming into the air, then curled into the raging river. Another one was seized by the monsters and dropped into the lava below, his body consumed before he could cry out.
"Go, go!"
George shouted, his voice hoarse over the roar of the river and the furnace heat.
"Don't stop!"
The air burned. The wind from the beast's wings whipped their clothes and hair as they pushed forward. Claws slashed at them and missed by inches. Every step felt like a prayer. Then, movement at the lake again. The soldiers who had thrown themselves into the water were rising. Twisted shapes, half human, half beast, emerged from the surface. One with the snout of an alligator and claws like iron. Another, a hulking bear man whose eyes glowed faintly red. A third, sprouting half-formed wings, shrieking as if his soul were being torn in two. They stumbled out of the lake in a daze, still transforming, their humanity dissolving into horror. The end of the path was their only hope. Ducking and firing at the winged beast, George shouted, "Watch out!" Ahead, the gravity lift pulsed brighter, a beacon in the chaos, spiraling like the eye of a storm. Its light called to them, cold and pure, untouched by the madness below. They ran, finally reaching the end of the narrow path and spilling onto the broader stone ledge near the lake, surrounded by the shifting forms of the transformed. Fire flickered weakly in the hollow, painted tired faces in amber and shadow. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic. Around them, the lake's edge was a nightmare. Soldiers, mid-transformation, groaned in agony, their bodies twisting into something inhuman. Above, the flying creature circled relentlessly, leathery wings slicing the air, eyes locked on prey. One of them swooped down and seized George. Evelyn fired and missed, the muzzle flash lighting her terrified face. No, George! She cried, trying to aim again but unable to risk hitting him. The creature lifted him high into the air, its talons digging deep. Then, from the corner of her eye, Evelyn saw something else. Smaller, faster, cutting through the sky like a storm. Its wings beat furiously, and its head, an eagle's head with a glinting beak, collided mid-air with the monster holding George. The two tangled, screeching, feathers and blood scattered in the air, and the beast lost its grip. Evelyn watched in horror as George fell, crashing hard against the mossy shore with a sickening thud. His hand grazed the glowing surface of the lake before he went limp. "George!" she screamed, sprinting to him. She grabbed his leg and dragged him back, her muscles burning, his body heavy and unresponsive. His bow scraped along the rocks as she pulled with everything she had. The roar of a bear-like creature shook the ground. Rose fired, the echo cracking across the water. Madeline screamed, her small .410 shotgun firing wildly at the circling horrors overhead. Things were emerging from the lake, shapes that could not exist. Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. "Come on, George, please wake up," she screamed. Over and over until her crying pleas wore out, until her voice was barely a sound. Tears ran down her face, and she pulled inch by inch, muscles about to fail. From the side, a slithering, half-human, half-alligator creature dragged itself forward, claws scraping the ground. Its yellow eyes gleamed with hunger. Evelyn's grip on her M1 Garand tightened. Every instinct screamed to let go of George and fire, but if she did, they'd both die. She held on, tears streaking her face, refusing to let him go. Then the eagle-headed beast swooped again, its talons sinking into George's jacket, heaving with powerful beats of its wings. Together, woman and strange creature pulled George inch by inch toward the glowing lift. Evelyn's arms trembled, but she didn't stop. The alligator creature lunged, jaws snapping inches from her leg. Rose fired again, a direct hit, the thing's head twitching from the impact, but it kept coming. Madeline sobbed as she fired again and again, her small frame shaking with every blast. The townspeople near the gravity lift screamed, some reaching the light and vanishing upward, others falling into the cursed water, their bodies twisting as they were seized by the bat-like monsters. The bear beast tore through the rest, its roar drowning out the gunfire. Then time seemed to slow. Ahead, the light of the gravity lift flared, brilliant, violent white, a pillar of impossible beauty piercing the darkness. Evelyn stumbled forward, her whole body shaking, dragging George into the radiance. The eagle creature released him at its threshold, its wings folding as if in reverence. The light engulfed them. Madeline ran and leapt in after them, her face streaked with ash and tears. George stirred weakly, his consciousness flickering. Gunfire, screaming, the roar of monsters, all of it fading beneath the hum of the lift. The last thing he felt was the sensation of weightlessness, the purest light he had ever known filling his vision, and then blackness.